Hello, I would like to present to you my curriculum project that I have put together for my course CE 520. My name is Sharon Wallace and I'm a special education teacher and I serve students in grades 9 through 12. Most of my students participate in career technical education at our local career technical school. The content that I looked at for this project was in the area of transition. All of my students have to receive instruction in post-secondary skills, employability skills, and life skills. For my special needs students, the state of Alabama has what's called transition standards, and that is directly related to the content that I'm responsible for teaching to my students. For this project, I looked at a specific area that explored their employment opportunities. Most of these students needed extra instruction on locating and finding a job. My project began by looking at the process analysis, exactly what is curriculum development and how does it relate to the project that I need to complete. The process includes a planning stage where you get together the people that you feel like will be best for developing your curriculum. Then you've got the articulating and development stage where you look at all the things that are important to this curriculum. Next, you're going to identify the resources that you need to teach the curriculum once you've decided what you're going to teach. And then how did it work? Did it work okay? And how are you going to determine? So you need to identify assessments that will help you understand if what you desired from this project was achieved. The next step in the process was the task analysis. And as a special education teacher, this was probably the easiest step for me in the process because we regularly do task analysis on breaking things down into smaller steps for understanding of our students. So as I looked at the employment opportunities, one of the items that we were looking at was identifying sources for learning of employment opportunities. And so that is going to be broken down into 4 steps of identifying one source for finding employment opportunities. That source could be a newspaper, it could be online employment searches, it could be word of mouth, and it could be for my students going to places to make applications. One of the things I found with my students recently is there's so many online opportunities for applications for employment, they kind of struggle. So we really have to look at teaching them how to utilize online application processes. Then they're going to demonstrate the ability to use at least 2 of these sources. We'll spend a lot of time with my students sitting side by side of logging on. How do you get logged on? How do you apply? How do you completely fill these out? But I also spend a lot of time with my students on here's a job application. How do you fill it out? Make sure that they're filling these out completely and thoroughly and in a penmanship that the employer can read. Then we're going to look at these sources and assess what's the positives for my students, what are the negatives for the students. Positives for the online is they don't have to worry about their penmanship because a lot of special needs students struggle in that area. The negatives is a lot of these students don't feel comfortable going out away from the school setting and applying for jobs. And getting through that first screener on a job application is very difficult, particularly for our special needs students, because they may not necessarily look at including all the information that they need to get through the first screen of an application. And then we want to help the students also look at market trends and what's out there and make sure that they're targeting a career that is going to be successful for them. A lot goes into helping these special needs students being prepared for employment. The next step was looking at goals, outcomes, and objectives. And for my curriculum, my key learning goal is for my students to become skilled in exploring employment opportunities. And their learning outcomes is to identify sources of learning of employment opportunities completing a graphic organizer. We've found over the years that with special needs students, they're very visual, so a graphic organizer is probably one of the best things you can do to help students remember and understand the process. We're going to help them. Their objectives are going to be to demonstrate skills that will help them obtain employment, identify criteria used to select an occupation. In other words, they don't, all of them want to be doctors and lawyers, but in reality, is that the best fit for them? And we spend a lot of time with our students looking at, okay, this is what you want to be. How do your skills fit into that career or occupation? And we're going to help them select one or two occupations that align with their personal goals. Got a lot of students that want to work on cars. Well, with the advances in technology today, some of my students don't have the ability to work with technology, so we've got to find them a fit for their skill set. And so we spend a lot of time looking at those. Then we want to identify training opportunities and requirements for a specific job. Most of our students are very, very hands-on and can go out there and work with their hands and make a really good living for themselves. But they also are going to need training, so we have to look at what training is available that will meet the needs of our special needs students. And at the end of this particular course, we're going to hope that our learner will be able to demonstrate their appropriate job-seeking skills and behaviors, and we're going to participate in some mock interviews just to help them get past that initial shock, for lack of a better term of putting it, of going out and trying to obtain a job without the support of their teachers. We're going to have them prepared before they leave us so that they have confidence and have had at least one or two opportunities to be in an interview setting. My project will be taught for the content and unit development will be taught in modules. And each module will include instruction. There will be videos. There's a lot of information. Some reading, kind of light on the reading simply because most of my content is directed towards special needs students. And a lot of times if there's a lot of reading, they will get bogged down with that and not get the point of what we're trying to get and teach to them. There will be assignments where that they can work and to demonstrate their ability to do what we're trying to help them understand, and then there'll be assessments to make sure that we have met the expectations of the unit and that they understand the direction that we're headed with this particular unit. Instructional strategies are very important, especially by special needs students. So the strategies that will be utilized within this curriculum will be direct instruction, modeling, lectures, conferencing, individual instruction, and vocabulary. The main reason for direct instruction is the students are going to need basically an introduction to what we're going to talk about. Modeling is probably one of the keys for my students because they are visual learners and that they can watch what you do, and typically they can reproduce that. So modeling is very important. Lectures will be used a little bit just because there's some things that they need to hear. But not so much lecture because most of these kids are going to shut down pretty quick. Conferencing is going to be used whenever we get together in small groups and we discuss what we've talked about. Sometimes in a large group setting, a lot of the special needs students are not willing to open up or not willing to talk. But if we get in a small group settings, most of the time they will talk. And so we're going to conference. And then there'll definitely be individual instruction because my students thrive on individual. They're not happy whenever they're called out, for lack of a better term. They need one-on-one so that they can be confident. And there's just some things, particularly in employment development, filling out applications, that's just a one-on-one individual, let's talk about it and get it figured out. Vocabulary will be very important to my instruction also because research is showing that students' vocabulary is one of their biggest obstacles. So as they get increased vocabulary, they can become owners of the information. So we'll make sure that there's a lot of vocabulary instruction so that whenever they hear a term, they'll understand what we're talking about. This project has been very interesting to me. Um, the curriculum that I put together can be utilized by students in all content areas. However, it is specifically instruction that is required by the state for special education to teach to our special needs students. Um, this project really made me dig deep, a lot of deep thinking, specifically in the content, determining what I was going to do my project on, because most of my day is driven by what someone else is teaching. So I really had to dig deep and think, okay, what content is my major responsibility, and how do I deliver that to my students? The changes that I probably would make would be into my time management and not overthinking some things, looking at areas that I need to focus more on, and look at things that my students may already know and be able to utilize that better. But all in all, this has been a great project. Kind of scary because we have a lot of transition standards that we are required to teach, and I touched on one during this project, and so there's a lot of work to be done in this area, because there's not a lot of developed curriculum for the teaching of the transition standard. So it made me realize we've got a whole lot of work to do as special education teachers to prepare our students for the future.